Hello, Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, the show that's probably best described as the loud place, usually, also the obnoxious place, certainly the nerdy place, and also, hopefully, the place you want to subscribe. A Quiet Place. One of two horror movies in which we watch Jim from The Office get ripped apart in front of our eyes. I guess there's just something about his face that screams, "Put me through a paper shredder." Just saying, he might be the new Mr. Fantastic, but there is nothing fantastic about his track record surviving on the big screen. Anyway, seeing him in Multiverse of Madness got me revisiting his past works, and I gotta say, A Quiet Place 1, still a banger. When this thing came out in 2018, it was game-changing. Not only did it provide huge representation for deaf actors, but in a pop culture landscape where everything is constantly screaming in your face for attention, the movie's silent ad campaign stood out as completely unique. The film introduces us to a race of aliens known as the Death Angels. Yeah, that is their official name based on the news clippings that are shown in the film. But these aren't your garden variety xenomorphs, my friends. These are apex predators that hunt purely by sound. The opening minutes make it immediately clear just how deadly these things are when we watch little Bo find himself a loud toy and get absolutely wrecked. Come to think of it, these guys should probably team up with the invisible creatures from Bird Box and the Weeping Angels from Doctor Who. They'd be like an unbeatable sensory legion of doom. As a result of their sensitivity to sound, the world has become, as the title says, a quiet place. In order to survive, people walk on sand to muffle the sound of their footsteps. They use sign language to talk, and they play board games using fabric pieces because plastic pieces would be too darn loud. Hold up, is that, are they playing Monopoly? If that is the entertainment that they have available, I don't know, I might be sacrificing myself to the Death Angels. The survivors have set up security systems that use fireworks as distraction mechanisms, and one of the few bits of relief that we and the characters get from the oppressive silence is when they go and visit a waterfall that allows them to safely shout. And you see, it's all of these details that make the world of this movie so darn good. The world feels really thought out, lived in, like the people who've lasted this long have truly done their homework in order to survive. And then part 2 came out and threw most of that away, but you know, sequel. Anyway, I think at this point we've all seen at least one How to Survive a Quiet Place video. And the survival tips tend to amount to something like, live near the waterfall so the sound of the water covers you. Great, thanks a lot, Captain Obvious. I want to go deeper. I don't want preschool survival tactics, I want post-grad stuff. I want to scientifically pinpoint the exact decibel ranges that'll keep me alive. Is stepping on an errant leaf an instant death? Is going shoeless on a path of sand really necessary, or is it just there for dramatic effect? What happens if I have a really loud fart? Well, as it turns out, director John Krasinski did think about that last one. When working on the films, he told his actors, and I quote, "Just try to crop dust." What that tells me, other than the fact that A Quiet Place is a silent but deadly world in more ways than one, is that there is a limit to how loud you can be. It's clear that the Death Angels aren't bothered by certain sounds, otherwise they'd be drawn to the family's nightly fire, or the rustling of the clothesline in the wind. So what do these monsters define as a tolerable volume? How loud can you afford to be in a quiet place and still survive? Since volume seems to be the key factor here, we're gonna need to look into measuring sound in decibels. So I grabbed my trusty decibel meter from the crunchiest chip episode of Food Theory and got to some real life testing. First was establishing a baseline of what the aliens would and wouldn't respond to in the film. The first kill in A Quiet Place happens when a toy rocket ship noise blasts off. So I found a similar toy IRL and measured it with my meter to find that it rang in at about 105 decibels. A loud inorganic noise like that is gonna be easily heard by the aliens. No surprises there. However, we also have to factor in the variable of distance. As we all know, being further away from a noise makes it much quieter. So the alien wasn't responding to a 100+ decibel sound, it was actually able to hear something much lower and immediately go on the attack. So how far away was the alien? Well, it took Bo out in roughly 30 seconds sprinting at what appears to be top speed. Based on the car chase sequence at the beginning of the second film, we can roughly estimate the distance that it covered. In that scene, an alien catches up to a 1975 Oldsmobile Delta 88 Royale after it's been floored for 8 seconds. That's a car that can go 0 to 60 in 11.9 seconds, meaning that these Death Angels can accelerate to a speed of at least 40 miles per hour just as quickly. Doing some quick calculations, it means that in order to hear the noise Bo's rocket ship made and reach him in time, the creature was at most 1,758 feet or 535.8 meters away. Now, 1,700 feet might seem like a long way off. However, according according to a noise attenuation calculator, even at that extreme distance, the noise would still clock in at 54 decibels. That is data point number 1. Another attack happens in the first movie when Evelyn steps on a nail and drops a glass picture frame. Here, we don't get a sense of the alien's distance, but real-world testing shows that glass breaking would clock in around 90 decibels. In other instances, a metal silo door opens, which would be around 100 dB, shotguns are fired, which is about 150 dB, and fireworks are used as a distraction, which makes a lot of sense considering they're very loud, 150 to 175 dB. In the sequel, aliens are alerted when people scream, when they rattle bottles, and when they crash into objects. What do all of these noises have in common? Two things. The noises aren't naturally occurring, and they always have sound levels above 50 decibels. These two factors seem to be the things that always wind up alerting the aliens. So, based on the first part of this analysis, I immediately have to call BS on the corn that the Abbott family has. There are several acres of perfectly planted rows. It's not like it's last year's crop either, because we see that harvest slowly dying in the fields. These stalks are lush green. They've clearly been planted after the invasion. I'm sorry, but tending to all this land is gonna make over 60 decibels worth of noise. You ever crack corn off its stalk? Has a solid alien whistle right there. So, now equipped with a baseline of what it takes to trigger an attack, I then started to test the things that we see the survivors do in their day-to-day lives. I stuffed a backpack and walked on all the surfaces that we see them cover in the movies: sand, gravel, grass, concrete. I measured the noise of insects and birds. I clanged glass bottles against each other. I yelled as loudly as possible and stood there like a creeper to figure out the noise drop-off of neighborhood joggers. Don't mind me, I'm just recording how loud you are for a YouTube video. By the way, would you help me find out how loud getting a leg stuck in a bear trap would be? It's for science! After tabulating all the results, I'm kinda shocked to say this, but all the stuff we see him doing in the movie, yeah, it's kinda a necessity for survival in this world. Walking on dried leaves is a literal death sentence, clocking in at minimum 55 decibels. Stepping on a stick, even worse. The resulting snap is upwards of 70 dB, and crunching along on gravel isn't that far off either, topping out at 45 decibels, dangerously close to our 50 dB limit. Walking on sand, meanwhile, deadens the sound considerably, lowering the volume down to a much safer 35 decibels. Grass, same deal. So for as ridiculously over the top as pouring out pathways of sand might seem in the movie, turns out it's a great way to ensure the safety of our survivors. Also a necessity, whispering. A normal conversation tends to happen in the 60 decibel range, which puts an immediate target on your back. But by softening it down to a whisper, which averages out at around 30 dB, you're gonna be in the clear. However, don't get too comfortable because our acoustic surroundings are always shifting. And this is where advanced survival techniques start coming into play. You see, during A Quiet Place, Evelyn warns Lee that sundown is rapidly approaching. Watching the movie, I, and I think the rest of the audience, assumed that this warning was because it's easier to travel during the day. Trails through the woods are home to routes and uneven roads that are begging for people to trip on them at night. And while that's certainly a big threat, one additional thing that most people wouldn't think about here is that sound travels further at night. You see, under normal conditions, the sun heats the earth, which means that during the day, warm air tends to be near the surface and cooler air tends to be at higher elevations. Sound waves travel faster in warm air and tend to move towards cooler temperatures. It's a bit of an oversimplification, but roughly that's how it works. As such, during the day, most sound refracts upwards into the sky and quickly disappears amongst the clouds. However, at night, or when there's dense cloud cover, a temperature inversion occurs. Cooler air stays near the Earth's surface, and the warmer air is found at higher elevations. Now when a sound happens, that sound wave is refracted back down towards Earth. It doesn't want to pass from cool air to warm up the clouds. The effect is that sounds can now be heard much more clearly over longer distances at night. So that's survival skills 301. Do all your business during the day. Also, I know you want to live close to water, but it might not be smart to live extremely close to a lake. During the nighttime hours, the colder water causes a natural amplification that allows the sound waves to travel further. Thus, while it's certainly smart to live near a water source, you just gotta make sure it's a running water source. Don't just move into the first lake house that you find. It's the equivalent of living next to an organic megaphone. This
temperature amplification effect also applies to seasons of the year. Since the Abbotts live in New York, where there are some incredibly cold, harsh winters, they have to be extra careful during those months. According to David Phillips, senior climatologist for Environment Canada, quote, "Never tell a secret on a cold day because you can hear people talking from as far as 6 kilometers or 3.7 miles away." But this is all defensive. Let's talk about going on the offense. At the end of the movie, Regan discovers the monster's weakness, a specific pitch of feedback coming from her cochlear implant. But did you notice that this feedback caused uncontrollable muscle vibrations in the Death Angel's body? Now, it might just be sensory overload short-circuiting the Death Angel's brain function, but a more accurate analysis of what's going on here appears to be tapping into the monster's resonant frequency. You see, pretty much every material has a natural frequency that it likes to vibrate at. When subjected to this frequency, the natural vibrations of the material are at their most extreme. In scientific terms, the amplitude of the vibration is at its peak. So if you can manage to hit a material with its specific resonant frequency loud and long enough, it'll vibrate so violently that it'll eventually break. This is how opera singers are sometimes able to shatter glassware. Now, most living things are made up of numerous soft organic structures with varying resonant frequencies, which makes it hard to weaponize sound. But the Death Angels just so happen to be covered claw to fang in a singular dense armor-like material, and Regan's cochlear implant tapped into exactly the right frequency. So now the question is, what frequency are we talking about? Listening to the scenes where this technique is used in both Quiet Place 1 and 2, you can tell that the pitch actually shifts quite a bit. There's no one set frequency here. However, after testing these using various online frequency identification tools, the killer tone appears to be somewhere between 1400 and 1900 hertz. Did I pinpoint an exact pitch? No, but I've at least greatly narrowed the test range. For reference, the TV audio test sound, yeah, that is a pure 1000 hertz tone. A typical smoke alarm, meanwhile, falls in at 3000 to 4000 hertz range. On YouTube, there are dozens of standalone videos where pure tones of these sonic ranges exist. There's also a handful of musical instruments that can play in these frequencies. High stringed instruments like the violin and viola, high woodwinds like the flute and piccolo, even the piano. In short, you don't need feedback from a cochlear implant to survive. You just need a solid internet connection or, some basic music skills. Then, by building up a feedback loop of the armor's resonant frequency, the Death Angels will have every inch of their exoskeletons buzzing in multiple directions. Unable to keep their plating aligned, they open up, exposing the soft, juicy, weak point inside, which is the perfect opportunity to strike. So there you have it, friends, a more scientific look at how to survive a quiet place. If you have to make noise, keep it under 50 decibels. Be extra careful at night or on cold days. Stay away from peaceful lakes that'll amplify sounds. And if you truly want to fight back, learn how to play an instrument. Glad to see that my 3 years of playing the viola badly throughout middle school will finally pay off. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory. And cut.